Welcome to Positive Live with Jan Boal, registered nurse and empowering guide. We all could use more positivity in our lives, now more than ever. Jan brings you cheer, interesting information, and uplifting ideas in regards to mind, body, spirit, environment, and energy as she and her guests explore all the positive possibilities that encompass our health. Hop on and join the adventure.
Hello, and welcome to another show of Positive Live. Today, I'm very excited about being able to introduce to you a wonderful guest, Donna Cardillo. She holds her master's, RN, certified speaking professional, a member of FAAN, and Reiki master, Labyrinth facilitator, and of course, about what our show is about today, forest bathing. So thank you so much, Donna, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on your show and talk about some favorite topics.
Right. I love the environment. And when I heard about this, I couldn't wait to interview you. What got you interested in forest bathing? And for most of us, what is that?
Well, I've always been a lover of the outdoors from a young age. I was a Girl Scout, been going camping, loved the woods and all of those things. As I got older and more involved in life, family, business, I was not spending a whole lot of time outdoors. I mean, my backyard, yes, but not really getting out to the woods and spending extended time in nature. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I saw a little blurb in a general news magazine about something called forest bathing. It was just a small article, and I was so intrigued by it, and I read the blurb, and I went online to Google it, and immediately came up an organization called Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides and Programs, and they were offering training programs all around the world, literally, to train guides to do this forest therapy program. And I'll explain what forest therapy is in a moment, but when I found out that one could actually get trained to guide people in this amazing thing, and that they were doing it all over the world, it just felt so energetic. And I got the sense from everything that I was reading that it was it's not a fad, but it was something that was just taking hold all around the world. And let me tell you exactly what forest bathing is and how it all got started. You'll often hear the Japanese expression Shinrin-yoku, which literally means forest bathing in Japanese. And back in the 1980s in Japan, they noticed that people were developing cancer at a higher rate than they previously had. And it was actually a very alarming rate. So they did some research on it, and they realized that people were spending a lot more time indoors. The 1980s was really the explosion of technology, and people started to go outdoors less, probably all of us around the world, but they noticed this in Japan. And people were getting sicker, but they noticed an increase in cancer rates. And they made a direct correlation between time people were spending outdoors and how people were getting sick. So they did, the Japanese love the outdoors, and they typically spend a lot of time outdoors. They began to do some work with people in bringing them out into the woods and spending more time. And they were finding that people certainly felt less stressed. They felt more relaxed. And when further research was done, they discovered that trees actually emit a chemical called phytoncides, and those chemicals help the tree, they protect the tree, but when humans are exposed to it and inhale it and are just in that general environment, that we can actually benefit from that as well, physically and emotionally, certainly, and then as a result of that, spiritually. So what happened was some people in different parts of the world discovered this practice, and the organization that I was trained by, there was a man named, his name was, Amos Clifford, and he brought his background as a Zen practitioner, a psychotherapist, and a wilderness guide all together, along with going to Japan and studying Shinrin Yoku. And he created a practice that we call forest therapy that is practiced all around the world right now, but he wanted to create something that was acultural, because in Japanese have very specific ways that they do things, and you know, their customs, which is the traditional Shinrin Yoku where it came from. But Amos Clifford created this program that would be applicable to people anywhere in the world and any culture. And so the term Shinrin Yoku, forest bathing, forest therapy, are used synonymously. You'll hear people use any of those phrases. It's really all the same thing.
I just love that. And we all know that those of us that like to really spend a lot of time out in nature, we always feel better when we feel like we need to get grounded, or just to go for a hike, or just even a walk where, you know, in a nice park. We always feel better. And I knew I felt better camping and being out in the woods. I've been a tree hugger way before it was ever popular. I mean, when I was little, I was just absolutely in love with trees and with being outdoors. Mm-hmm. And I just felt this connectedness. And so I knew that there was something that they provided, but I just thought, oh, it's just nature. But once again, you know, science has shown us the reason behind why we have that connection.
Yeah, and there's lots of science. There's so much research behind this. First of all, just for being outdoors and connecting with nature, forest bathing is a very specific practice, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But just being out in nature is wonderful and lots of health benefits. But this practice of forest bathing is something, again, that originated in Japan in the 1980s, but is being practiced all over the world now. And it's a type of practice, you know, we call yoga a practice, meditation a practice. Forest bathing is a practice as well. The more you do it, the more benefit you get from it. And I am a trained guide, so I might take just one person, but typically I'm taking a group of people outside ideally into a wooded area, although forest bathing can be done in any natural setting, but we really want to be with trees if we possibly can be, because there's a lot of specific benefits there. And we guide people through a process of slowing down, of getting into the present moment, of alivening and awakening their senses, and then inviting them through certain things to help them get there and really get into this sort of liminal space where we're leaving the craziness of the regular everyday world behind, and we're coming into this this in-between space where we can let the outside world go for a while, really focus on ourselves, the people we're with, nature, our surroundings, and feel very connected. And then there's lots of opportunity to share different experiences in that process as well. And, you know, sometimes people say, oh, and I think I even said this earlier, I've gotten connected from nature. We often see ourselves as separate from nature, but we are actually part of nature.
Absolutely.
So when someone says I'm disconnected from nature, what we're really saying is I'm disconnected from myself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds like that whole experience when you're talking about that is the forest is its own temple. And when we're in there, we're just at peace.
Yes, it absolutely is. And one of our mottos in forest therapy is the forest is the therapist and the guide opens the door.
Oh, so is there a series of exercises then that you do with your clients, and then do they then do this on their own, try to do it, like, is it best to do it weekly? Is there a schedule?
Yeah, well, first of all, we actually call them invitations rather than exercises, because it isn't anything rigid or rote that we give people to do, but there are certain things we'll invite people to pay attention to or notice what they're noticing, working through their senses. And there's lots of different invitations that we use in that setting. So if you were to come to a guided walk, for example, with me or someone else, and there are many practitioners, I know you happen to be in California, even though there's a lot going on in California right now. There are many guides out in California. In fact, that's where the organization is based, even though they're
I'm in
all.
Oregon.
Pardon?
I'm in Oregon.
Oh, you're in Oregon.
Yeah,
Okay.
all
Yeah,
along the West Coast.
I don't know why I thought you were in California, but anyway, I had that in my head. So you might then go out on your own and do some of those same invitations on your own, but it's good to go with a group whenever you can. Spending time outdoors, absolutely, but you can learn a lot from coming to a guided walk. We call it a walk. We're not hiking or doing any physical activity. We're just really usually mulling around a little bit in a very small area. And even people with disabilities, there are people that do walks in areas where people can come with wheelchairs and walkers and all of that. But once you get a better handle on how to utilize that space and time, how to calm yourself down, slow yourself down, I should say, get very present, enliven your senses. And, you know, one of the things we do, we have sort of a progressive set of invitations we do to help people to drop in, as we call it. Most of us, we're using our senses all the time, but we're not isolating them. We're, you know, seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, everything all at the same time. And we don't really notice a lot of things that are going on in our world, whether we're in our home or even if we're out in nature, but perhaps especially out in nature. There's so many different sounds that are nearby, sounds that are far away. And when you stop to listen and you just focus on your hearing, for example, you might close your eyes to drown out that sense for a little while and just take time to listen. There's so many different sounds in nature that are so beautiful, that are so unique. Often people who come on the walk are amazed at how many different bird songs they hear. Like they were aware that bird song was in their environment, but they didn't realize how many different and unique bird songs there were in that environment and how some were near and some were far away. That's just an example.
Exactly. And then to distinguish between birds and chipmunks and things running around, and it's
the leaves swaying, just the wind. There's so many different things to notice. And again, just to enliven our senses, it's really quite an invigorating experience. And it's a good practice to use all of our senses fully on a regular basis like that in a beautiful natural environment, because then we become more tuned into things in our everyday life when we work at honing those senses and isolating different things rather than just taking in everything at one time. We're usually on sensory overload in our regular everyday life.
Right. I absolutely agree. I love the sound of the wind blowing through the trees. You know, I automatically close my eyes and just, you know, it's like they're all whispering and talking to each other at the same time. And actually recently, right before the fire started a week ago, I was up in the woods because we just have to walk straight up our dirt road and we're in the forest. And I was able to get this picture. You couldn't hear it, but I looked straight up and you could see all the trees, you know, coming up like that. And then a wind came and then leaves just kind of gently, because it was just the very beginning, you know, it's the end of summer, beginning of fall. And I just love it. You know, I absolutely love it when the leaves fall. I always think of it being magical and kind of like little fairies floating down or something. And it's very calming, but also too, like I said, I can kind of go off with it and have it be a little more magical and be in that sense in it. And I just love it. But first and foremost, I when I walk out into the woods or anywhere, it's my olfactory that really goes alive. I love this. I can smell the water. I can smell the green. I can smell the dirt. And boy, that just just brings me in.
One of my friends who came on one of my walks, she is out in the woods regularly. She walks and she takes her dogs for walks. And when she came on the forest bathing therapy walk with me, she said something so interesting to me. She said, I always am in the woods. She said, but I don't really spend time with the woods. And I thought, wow, that is so insightful. So she walks through the woods regularly, but she never really takes the time to just sit and notice and observe and be. One of the invitations that we use, and something that certainly anyone can incorporate into their own private practice by themselves anytime, is something we call a sit spot, where you have, just as you might sit and meditate every day or do some yoga, finding a sit spot. It would be great if it was outdoors, but if you're not in a climate where you could be outdoors all the time, it could be near a window where you're at least looking out at nature. And sitting for, 20 minutes would be ideal, but sitting for a period of time and just being with nature, just observing it, just using all of your senses and being part of it. And that is something that when we were trained as guides, that was part of our training. And I went to a 6-day intensive, and then we had a 6-month practicum to become certified. And one of the things in the practicum was that we had to develop a daily practice of having a sit spot and keeping a sit spot journal. So I'm fortunate to have a beautiful backyard. I have woods in the back and lots of little animals, and I have bird feeders back there. So I would sit for 20 minutes, and it's amazing the things that can happen in 20 minutes. First of all, when you sit still for a while, nature gradually returns. Animals, birds, like they might initially go away when you come out, but they come back, and you gradually become part of what's happening. And then when you have a sit spot every day, or as often as you can, and you're just staying in that spot and observing the same area, you begin to notice things that you just haven't seen before, that you haven't noticed because you didn't take the time to sit and look. That's one possible thing. A sit spot could even be with a tree, sitting in front of a tree. Certainly could stand and lean against a tree or put your arms around a tree. And by the way, the first time I went to a forest therapy walk, I went on a walk with a certified guide a few times to get an understanding of what the practice was about, to make sure that it was something that I wanted to pursue as a trainer. And she gave us an invitation to find a tree in the area that we were in, and to connect with that tree in any way that was comfortable for us. And that's not something that people typically invite you to do on a regular basis. And so what I did was I walked up to a tree and I leaned against it. I think I initially leaned my back against it, and I just put all my weight against the tree. And I was impressed with how unbelievably solid and unmovable that tree was. Now, we might think that all the time, but because I was leaning against it, it just suddenly gave me an amazing sense of stability, of centeredness, maybe even of security, thinking, wow, this tree is so solid. I could do anything to it and it's not even going to budge. And that alone was quite an interesting experience.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because for me, before even knowing about forest bathing, and if I'm not available to go out in the woods and I need to ground myself, I picture myself as like a tree, and I'm submerged partway into the dirt. Mm. And then I imagine my toes branching out, forming branches, and just growing higher and higher to become that tree, because it's so wonderfully grounding. Mm-hmm. And trees are, like you said, they're so strong, but yet there's a part of them that's very movable. Sure. And it's that soothing as well.
Of course, and that visualization that you just described is something that we might do when we have a group out in the woods. We really want to guide people in feeling their roots, figuratively, spiritually, to nature, and that's a grounding technique that we use also to find our center and to remind us that we're of the earth. So that's something that we might do as part of the practice also, that one can then take with them into their own private practice afterwards. But just like with a yoga practice or even meditation, and I'm a meditation practitioner, I'm a meditation teacher, I do meditate on my own frequently, but I love to, and I always advise people to periodically go with a group where you have a leader or a facilitator. The same thing with yoga, going to a yoga class. And it's the same thing with forest bathing or forest therapy. You certainly can learn the practice, and you can do it on your own when you're there, but having a guide really helps you, as I mentioned, to slow down, to be in the present moment, and to explore and open up in ways that you might not if you were on your own.
Right, because other people are going to provide other opportunities, or say something that you're like, oh, I never thought about that. And it helps to kind of get you out of your mind too. I think if you get to a point where you get used to it, then you can kind of create that habit, as opposed to going out with a group or going to a yoga class, because it just creates a whole different feeling.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we do have sharing circles. Nobody has to say or do anything actually when you come on a forest therapy walk. You could just sit in a chair or on the ground if you wanted to and watch what everybody's doing if you choose to. But we do have sharing circles, not only in the beginning when we get started. We do some introductions or ask people if they've ever done this before, why they're there. But then after each invitation, we gather together in a circle. And if people want to share, they can. If they don't want to, and you don't have to share in words. Sometimes people just make a gesture. They might just put their hands together, bow. I've even had people maybe sing a song, something that they thought of. But the point is, hearing what other people got out of something, or what they discovered about themselves or about the environment, we can all benefit from that. I remember one walk I did in a beautiful environment in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. I did a weekend retreat for nurses, and I had a group of 15 nurses there. And there was one invitation where the group was invited to just notice what's in motion, to just wander in the area that we were and notice what's in motion. And first of all, if you just scan an area where you are, you might say, oh, I see the birds moving, I see the leaves moving. When you really stop, and that's your sole focus, to see what's in motion, you start to see so many things and realize that so many things around you are moving all the time. And if I always say to participants, if you don't see anything moving, then maybe you need to stop for a moment, stop yourself, and then look to see what else is moving around you. But I bring this up because there was apparently a very interesting spider web that many of the participants noticed, with a very active spider in it. And when we came back to share after that invitation, each of them had such incredible analogies from witnessing the web and the spider activity and what was going on there. Someone related it to their own personal struggles, and it's just amazing what comes out. And just, it's a very creative environment and practice to be in also. So it's a lovely way to connect with nature, with self, with other people, to just have some quiet time and space to think about things. We put so many things, like you said, get out of our head, where, we put so many things, maybe that some things we do need to think about. We've got them buried away because we're so busy with tasks and managing technology and people and everything in our life. So it's nice to be alone with our thoughts, to have some quiet time and to see what even comes up.
Absolutely. That's that saying, stop and smell the roses.
Right.
That means you absolutely have to stop. And you had said something earlier about human beings and things along that line. And one of my, slogans I say is, we're so busy being human doers, we forget that we're supposed to be human beings. Yes. And that being is just to be with our surroundings that are, forest, nature, whether it's a river or the ocean or whatever, it can all provide such beauty and grace, and then what that imposes upon us. And I love how you talked about the spider web and all the creativity that came out of it. And I bet you nobody there would have ever thought that they were going to be creative over something like that.
Absolutely.
But not until you're in, you're in that moment that you feel it.
Yeah.
Native American teachings talk about the trees being the standing people, and rocks are the ancient ones. So they use very much nature as a part of the human race.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, that reminds me of another example of a woman that was in another one of my groups, and she apparently had been feeling very stuck and stagnant in her life. And she noticed a lot of rocks. You just mentioned stones and rocks. She noticed a lot of the rocks. There were a lot of beautiful rocks around. And she said, it occurred to me that even a rock has life in it, has energy in it. We often look at rocks as sort of non-existent, inanimate objects. She said, I realized that even stones and rocks have life and energy in them. And if they do, then I do too. And that, in other words, because I guess she was feeling like a stone. She was feeling heavy and stuck to the ground and not moving and inanimate. And she realized that everything is alive in nature, including stones. And that made her realize that she's got a lot of life in her too that she wasn't thinking about. So I'm just sharing some examples of some wonderful things that happen. And again, we all of us in the group benefit from even hearing about other people's experiences. That may not have been what came up for me or what I needed, but just hearing and seeing someone else realizing that moment of self-discovery and inspiration that's very uplifting. It's very life affirming for everybody in the group.
Yes, absolutely. Because it's a beautiful gift.
Yes.
That's something they're like, oh my gosh, the lights came on. And it's wonderful to watch people when they experience that, to be with them. Absolutely. It's empowering for themselves on so many different levels.
Right.
You brought up about nurses. Now, what I didn't tell the rest of the audience is I met you at the National Nurses Business Association, and I was there basically because of another little breakout session that you were doing that I was very interested in. And then you talked to me about forest bathing. I just went, what? Because it was just like, it's like I sort of already did it anyway, but I wanted to know more and what was it? And there's science that backs behind it. So if you're a nurse out there, there is a lot to learn at National Nurses Business Association. So I highly recommend joining it and being a part of their conferences because you tap base with so many different people. And that even a year down the road, I'm still hooking up with people who I never thought that I would, but somebody else introduced me. So what's the latest going on with the conference now?
Yeah, I'm on the advisory board of the National Nurses and Business Association. I've been a longtime member, and it's been a huge help to me. I just posted on Facebook today on my personal profile. I said, when there's something you want to do, it makes sense to rub elbows with those already doing that thing. And then a little while later, there was a nurse that called me for some advice. She said, I want to start a business. I'm not really sure how to go about it. And I, of course, referred her to NNBA. Advised her to join, go on the website, but we are having our annual conference. It will be virtual this year, as are many conferences. And it starts the weekend, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend. I believe the dates are, well, I don't have the dates in front of me.
Well, I think it's around September 25th is a Saturday. I'm fairly certain. No, it's not. It's a Thursday because I was supposed to leave.
Okay.
That's why I hadn't signed up, because I was supposed to be going to Scotland and Ireland that day.
Okay. So that's Thursday was the 25th. Okay. So the 26th are several pre-conference workshops. And then the conference itself is Saturday and then part of Sunday. But everything's going to be recorded. So if you're not available to watch any of it live, it will be available in recorded version for, I think, about a month. But nnbanow.com is the website, and all of the details are there.
And there's so much to learn. And even, what I'm excited about is that I can watch part of it live. And if I don't have time for all of it, I know I can catch up later and watch the other parts that I want to see, because there is a wealth of information at these conferences.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience for me. Yeah. And I just
And
started
also
that.
for anyone who wants more information about forest bathing, again, it's Nature and Forest Therapy. It's the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides and Programs. You can just Google that. I think the website is natureandforesttherapy.org probably. Lots of information there just about forest bathing as well as about the training. The trainings right now are primarily virtual. As I mentioned, I went to a 6-day live intensive, and then I had a 6-month practicum, which of course we did remotely because we're from all over the place. And so now the training they've shifted it. It's going to be 6-month virtual program. And then hopefully in the future, when we're able to get back out, there will be some live getting together as part of that training. But I learned so much. It was such an incredible experience. It was my own nature immersion experience to be there. I also have a couple of books I'd like to recommend to your readers, if I may. One excellent book is called The Nature Fix. And let's see, I took my glasses off because there was a lot of glare in the lenses. So The Nature Fix by Florence Williams this book is so riveting. It's a journalist who set out to study and experience herself the connection between nature and health and wellness, but really to put all the research to the test. And fascinating book. And then a book specifically about forest bathing is written by the man Amos Clifford that I mentioned. It's called Your Guide to Forest Bathing. It's a small book. It's an easy read, but this is a great introduction to what the practice is all about, and lots of good information in there also.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
It's one of my on my to-do list to do.
Yeah. Good.
And hopefully before I retire, I'll do it, because I want to start doing all of this now and doing it with people.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah, and I of course, I haven't been doing, some of my colleagues they're doing a live forest bathing again, and I will be doing that soon, but we haven't really been doing much live, although many people have been doing virtual walks. They're using their phone camera and they're, going through the whole thing, and people can tune in and participate in that way.
It's the next best thing to be in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great. That's great. Now, something else that you do that appears that it would tie in with it, because I was also interested in having one of these on my property, and that's a labyrinth.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Oh, I would love to. I would love to. I'm a trained labyrinth facilitator, and I discovered the labyrinth, which is different from a maze. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I discovered the labyrinth when I went out to a resort in Arizona a number of years ago, and there was a labyrinth there. It was the first time I had seen one or heard of one, and I learned how to walk the labyrinth. The labyrinth is different from a maze. A maze has a lot of dead ends where you have to try to figure out how to make your way from one end to the other. Most labyrinths, there's only one path. There's only one way in and one way out. So you can't you could get lost if you step into the next circuit, just as you could get lost in life. But my point is, there are no dead ends in a labyrinth. There's one continuous path to the center, and then there's one continuous path to get out of the labyrinth. The labyrinth is a spiritual tool that has existed we don't even know, no one knows when it first appeared, but it goes so far back. There is evidence of labyrinths so far back in the history of man. It's mind-boggling. That alone is so incredible to me. And the labyrinth has seen a real resurgence of interest, I would say, in the last perhaps 5 or 10 years particularly. It could be compared to a walking meditation, because typically you're walking slowly and deliberately in the labyrinth, although you can walk at your own pace in the labyrinth. But a typical labyrinth walk, for example, is usually made up of 3 parts. One would be the journey inward, where you are consciously or purposefully letting go of what you don't need, what no longer serves you. Could be things from the past. It could be a whole number of things in your life. When you get to the center, there's a center of the labyrinth that's considered, the center of a circle is usually a spiritual place. So the spiritual center, when you get there, you can take a few minutes to some people stand there for a moment. You could say a prayer, you could ask a question, you could just ask for any guidance or anything that you might need at that point. And so you're receiving at that point, and then the journey out would be the assimilation, where you're just absorbing and incorporating into your life any gifts you may have been given. Those gifts, some might be known. You might have had some revelation, or you might have come to some resolution for something you've been grappling with, or you might not be aware of anything in particular, but still you have in some way benefited from the labyrinth walk and just focus on assimilating it. It's always a good idea to pause at the opening and to just take a moment to center yourself, take a couple of deep breaths, bring yourself into the present moment. I like to bow at the entrance of the labyrinth and just express gratitude for whomever built the labyrinth, for the ground that the labyrinth is on, for the energy and the spirit of those who have walked it in the past, whoever dedicated it. And then I do my labyrinth walk. Again, it's a tool, and it is something to do as often as you can, really. There are labyrinths everywhere, and interestingly, sometimes there might be one right in your neighborhood and you didn't even know it was there. There's a website called labyrinthlocator.com, and you can type in your state or zip code, and you can find out what labyrinths are in your area. So you'll find, like I said, they're become very popular, particularly in the last 5 or 10 years. So there are some labyrinths that have been around for a while, but there are many new ones that have been going up. Some of them you'll find in public parks,
Right.
Some of them at retreat centers that they may be open to the public at any time. Many churches these days have labyrinths on their property, which is very interesting. I learned about a small church in my community that had built one several years ago. And I read about it in the newspaper, and I visit that periodically. I just spoke to one of my neighbors the other day. That labyrinth is only a few miles from our home. She had absolutely no idea that it existed, even though she's very interested in labyrinths. And I guess that was the first time, for some reason, she and I spoke about it. So she was just absolutely startled. There's another beautiful labyrinth in a nearby town right by a big hospital. And when I told some of the nurses at that hospital about the labyrinth, they were shocked. They just didn't know it was there. So sometimes perhaps if you're not seeking it out, you just wouldn't know they're there. When I visit other places, when I'm traveling on business or traveling for whatever reason, I'll use the labyrinth locator to see if there are any labyrinths where I'm going. And I love to check out new labyrinths and walk different labyrinths. It's something wonderful. Another thing some people do when they walk a labyrinth is they might pick up a small stone or shell or feather or flower and carry that into the center with them, and then symbolically leave it there, as if you could consider it an offering, or you could consider leaving something behind before you take your assimilation walk out of the labyrinth.
I love that. And I've enjoyed over the years walking them. I've just been somewhat mindful, but I never had it explained. And I think labyrinths naturally kind of draw you in. There's just something, for lack of a better word, magical or sacred about them that you just know. With how they're set up, it just calls to you. And I love that idea of labyrinth.com. I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to check that out.
Labyrinthlocator.com.
Okay, labyrinthlocator.com.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Because now I know anywhere I go, I can do that. And then you're going to be in a peaceful surrounding.
Yes.
And you get to enjoy somebody else's beautiful landscaping that they do around there, or do nothing. And yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And some people, you mentioned that you wanted one on your own property. Some people do have they build them, or they have someone build a labyrinth on their property. And some people allow people to use it, during daylight hours or whatever. You don't have to if it's on private property, but my point is, you'd be surprised at labyrinths that may be in your community or nearby and that are available for you to walk. They're being used today even in schools. Some labyrinths can be made on the spot. People can come and set them up perhaps in the morning and be used in the afternoon. Obviously, it's not a permanent one. There are also portable ones that are made on large pieces of canvas, so they can be rolled up and brought to different places. So they're being used in a lot of different settings for retreats with kids, maybe people who are having addiction issues. And by the way, forest bathing is a great practice for people with a whole variety of challenges in their life also, including people that are in recovery. And we're just finding all different ways to guide and to lead people using these spiritual tools that we have available. Modern medicine has become so advanced, and we have so much to offer in terms of drugs and machinery and technology and other things, and all of that is valuable, but it works best. And sometimes, instead of using the spiritual tools that we have available to us, at the very least, I would want to incorporate those spiritual tools in all of the modern medicine that we have. But modern medicine doesn't work for everybody, especially in the mental health field.
Right.
And there are many people that still cannot find a good solution or medication or treatment. And so we're starting to say, hey, we've had these tools, they're out there. Some people never took them seriously, or they thought they were just for people who walked around with peace beads around their neck chanting. But now we're starting to say, there's a growing body of research behind this. Let's give it a try. Let's at least incorporate it with traditional methods, but let's absolutely teach people how to use these tools and create their own practice. And we're seeing some amazing and startling results with that.
Oh, absolutely, because I have done some shamanic training as well. And that's really becoming up on the rise. And when I say I meditate, for the most part, I'm really journeying. I use the drum or listen to a variety of different, it depends. I can just pretty much listen to anything and I'm gone. But it's being a psychiatric nurse, I created a program that was dance therapy. It was something I always wanted to do. And it was not until I became a nurse and then a psychiatric nurse that I could then implement it. And it was everything and more that I dreamed it would be. I mean, the class was always full. They loved it. Movement is so good for us. Whether we're just like I said, walking in the labyrinth or walking outdoors, but movement and being focused on something else, on just yourself and moving to music. There's things that smell and sound and movement can take you where medication and psychotherapy can't.
Exactly. And you brought up Native American earlier, and I'm very interested in Native American practices and traditions, and certainly healing practices. And it is said that medicine men will ask people when they're ailing, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? And that's so powerful. That always gives me goosebumps, because you think, wow, that's not what one would expect to hear coming out of the mouth of a healer. But yet the indigenous people know so much more than many of us know in the Western world about, energy and what really makes us sick and what really keeps us well.
Right, because we're so busy listening to car ads and cereal jingles and our to-do list and everything, that we're not being, and we're not being joyful with just simple things. I mean, powwows are
Right.
so powerful to go to. I just, they move me like nothing else. I mean, I studied dance, but I love cultural dance best over everything. And yeah, because they're mimicking, for some, like when they do the chicken dance and stuff, they're mimicking other animals and such, and it's powerful, and they do an absolutely incredible job. And then they have these great headdresses and tails and such, and yeah, it's
Beautiful.
and then they have the drumming that's going on and the singing, and so it's all good. And I am also involved in the Oregon Holistic Nurses Association. So yeah, all of it is good, whether it's Chinese medicine, Native American, whether you're studying Buddhism or forest bathing or whatever. They kind of all lead to one road,
Absolutely.
and that is being and being quiet. And when we're quiet, that's when your guides can talk to you. And that's when you get those ideas. That's when that energy can get sent out to the rest of the world. But it's so peaceful. It's, and that is joy in itself. Absolutely.
And also, you said something earlier that made me think of this. I wanted to, I'm glad I didn't forget about it. The world that many of us live in is so sanitized. We're just, again, we're indoors, but everything is so sanitized. And getting back out in nature in one way or another is a great way of recreating mystery and mysticism and joy, absolutely, and just wonder and awe. You talked about leaves coming down, and I think you made reference to fairies. I've been spending time in the woods since I was young, and always I would imagine that fairies were living in the woods. And when I would see different like layers of fungus on a tree all the way down, I'd say, oh, that's a fairy condo, imagining that they were living there. And
that's
just
what I do.
Yeah, even awakening that sense of imagination, which a lot of us have just, not since we were children. We typically have a great sense of imagination when we're very young, but that gets squashed often as we get older and we have responsibilities, especially if we have a difficult life. And even some children have very, very difficult lives filled with hardship. So just to awaken that sense even of imagination, getting outdoors, imagining different things, or looking at trees and as if you see a face in them, or an object that looks like something else, and imagining that it's a turtle, that frozen place. There's just a great sense of awe and playfulness in nature as well.
Right. And that is very, very important. When in Native teachings, they talk about the 4 directions, and each of them, besides, east, west, east, south, west, and north, but there's, depending on what tribe you're with, they talk about what animal represents that, and what that resonates with. And so in south, for the teachings I've studied, usually is about coyote, and it's about joking, but it's also remembering youthfulness and joy, that playfulness. You play tricks on each other and stuff, and you can laugh and have fun with that, and it's not everything, taking it so personal. And yeah, it made me think about those that live in like big cities, that all they have is, maybe they get to really enjoy, the New York City park, and I lived in San Francisco, and they have a beautiful park. I loved going in there and kind of being in the trees, and felt like I was, back in there with the moles and everything. And people forget, they forget that, how it's okay to get a little dirty. Because at first people are like, well, I don't want to camp, there's bugs, no, what's this, and there's a cobweb, and then you realize over time, oh my gosh, how silly was I remember camping outside once, that we weren't even camping in a tent, but just outdoors. And this was up at Lake Shasta, and there was wildlife and deers, and I remember thinking, what if a deer comes and nibbles on me at night? It's like, now I'm thinking, how awesome would that be, you know? So you just have to look at changing your perspective, and you just got to get comfortable with it. And the way to get comfortable with it is to do it. And then you're going to see all the other doors that open up for you by doing that.
And I just want to share with you and your listeners, I mentioned earlier that I always loved camping. I was camping from a young age with Girl Scouts, and I went, first of all, I went solo camping, which means I went camping by myself for the first time in my life. I'm in my 60s, several weeks ago. It was something that I wanted to do, was something I felt I needed to do, but I also had not been camping at all in over 25 years since my husband became sick and disabled. We used to go camping all the time. He became disabled, had not been camping at all in 25 years. 25 years is a very long time. It's a little less than half of my life. And it was something in me, like the medicine man asking, when did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing? I had not gone camping for a quarter of a century. And it was, I've been outdoors, but camping and sleeping outdoors and cooking your meals and fires, there is something so amazing about that. And so I wanted to go camping again, and I wanted to go by myself, and I did well with that, and I've got my second trip planned. But was I nervous about going out by myself? I absolutely was. Fortunately, I met a group of women who camp by themselves all the time, and they answered all my questions, addressed all the fears that I had, and I felt better prepared to go. But it is really an amazing experience. Even if you go with a friend, you don't have to go by yourself. Anybody I know that's had a bad camping experience, they usually either went with people that weren't prepared, or it was pouring rain. And I say, try it again. Go with somebody who's experienced, who's got a good tent, knows how to set it up, and make a fire and all, and just experience it. There is just something about that experience of spending more than an hour or two in the outdoors, actually being out there all that time. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, that it was something I did recently. It was really had to step out of my comfort zone to do it, but in the process I gained so much, and I really gained so much of myself back.
Right, because I have done that before, because I have, like I said, I've done a fair amount of studying under Native American teachings, and one of them was the Vision Quest. And so I really, really wanted to do one. So what I did instead, I didn't take drugs, but, and you can or can't. And really a quest can be simple as a few hours. You just have that intention or whatever. But I did the same thing, and luckily we had our own property, but it was still out in the wilds, and it was on Lake Roosevelt. But I did it all by myself, and I didn't play music or anything. I just, I was just hunkered down, and I made a medicine wheel out of rocks and such, and I just kept it very
nice,
sacred, and I journaled, and I just enjoyed hearing everything. And of course, the stars at night, it was just this blanket of lights. And sure, sometimes when you're in the tent and you're like, oh, what was that? What was that? And, and I had no idea that what it prepared me for. And this is what I tell people in my workshops. When you ask for it, be prepared, because you have no idea what other doors are going to open up. And that's what led me to go on my other vision quest, where I quit my job and traveled around the world by myself studying endangered animals. So you just never know where it's going to go. So, but that really is part of what led me to get to that place.
You just gave me some great ideas, because when I went on my recent solo trip, I did make an outdoor altar for myself. And by altar, I don't mean anything religious for those people that might not be familiar with that. I just collected some items of nature and I put them together in a special spot. And it's just my way of honoring the land. And we're very aware in forest therapy too, of honoring the land. And we're not only looking to enrich people, we're really looking to heal people. We're looking to heal nature and the environment also. But anyway, I set up my altar. It was actually about 100 degrees when I went camping, which was a challenge. But it's much cooler now here on the East Coast. And I did see through a group that I belong to of people who are interested in labyrinths, someone who made an outdoor labyrinth, a temporary labyrinth with pieces of bark that she found. I think I'm going to do that on my upcoming camping trip. I'm going to find branches and make a small labyrinth for myself. I'm actually camping on a very large campsite. Or I will also make a medicine wheel while I'm there. That was just a great idea. And people say, what did you do all week? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I was building a labyrinth, building a medicine wheel, practicing. But you just gave me some great ideas.
And it's good. People are afraid to be by themselves.
Yeah.
People are they don't like the quiet, because then they have to be with themselves. And that is the best medicine in the world we can do for ourselves, is to be doing. And really, we're just supposed to be being.
Yeah.
That's what we are. And to be connected with nature. So I'm very excited about forest bathing. And what's the chemical again?
Phytoncides. It's PHYTONCIDES. Phytoncides.
It's the tree's love drug.
And I wanted to also mention the organization that I became a trained labyrinth facilitator from is Veriditas, VERIDITAS. By all means, go to their website. And I mean, whether you want to become a facilitator or not doesn't matter. Lots of wonderful information and programs and retreats that they run also. It's great. I mean, sometimes you just need to have experience with other people to learn more about it, see what it's about. And I will be I'm incorporating, because I am a forest therapy guide, I'm a labyrinth facilitator, I'm also a meditation teacher, as I mentioned. I am going to be creating a whole nature-based program page on my website that's in process right now, that I'll be incorporating that into the traditional work that I do, which is keynote speaking in front of thousands of people in big convention centers. Although my objectives are always the same, there's lots of different ways to serve people. And this will be a wonderful addition to my business and just to my life work as well. And so my website is donnacardillo.com, just like my name, donnacardillo.com. And there's lots of free articles and all sorts of information there as well. I have a couple of blogs. I post something inspirational every day on social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. So follow me there as well. I'd love to hear from you, connect with you, share experiences. And if you're interested in forest bathing, labyrinth, anything, you have more questions for me, just send me an email or contact me in any other way. Donna at donnacardillo.com. Pretty easy to remember.
So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
More Positive Live at janboal.com.